So, in life, there comes times where you feel like, you're not ready. Why does nobody feel like they're ready for real life? And, the moment when you're technically an adult, but you don't really feel like one, maybe you graduated, maybe you got the job, you paying bills, you just kind of show up for things, right? And there's still like this lingering thought in the back of your head, and it's just like, why do I still not feel like I'm ready? You know? Everyone else looks like they figured it out, right? They're moving forward, maybe they're starting a family, they're getting married, they're very confident. They're stable, at least they seem like it on the outside. And you're kind of just hoping nobody notices you're still kind of just winging it, right? But I'll tell you something that nobody might tell you. Nobody really feels like they're ready for real life. Not when it actually starts, we're taught like a sort of lie that growing up, we're sold a timeline, go to school, graduate, get a job, and then suddenly you'll be ready for things, right? Like there's a switch that flips, but real life really doesn't work like that. There's no moment where someone will tap you on the shoulder and they'll be like, "Okay, you're prepared. You got this, buddy." Instead, real life will hit you while you're still asking the questions, while you're still learning these things. Bills come before confidence, responsibility comes before clarity, pressure comes before purpose in things. And the problem is, we assume that feeling unready means we're behind in things, right? But it doesn't mean that. I think that it just means that you're human. You're like everybody else. You know, everyone may look ready to you, but they're not. And I'll tell you why. They're just doing what they're quote unquote supposed to do. They pick the path, they're following rules, they're staying busy. But being busy isn't the same as being certain in things. Most people aren't confident, but they're just committed to what they're doing, committed to their 9 to 5, committed to whatever their family, committed to the path they chose because changing paths feels scarier than staying stuck. And I'm not saying you should change your path if you have a family, like love your family, obviously. But they don't question, they don't pause, they don't admit confusion, they just kind of keep rolling, keep moving, hoping that clarity will show up later. But spoiler alert, it usually doesn't, unless you slow down enough to really think about things. But you know feeling unready is really a sign of growth, in my opinion. And here's the twist that I feel like most people may miss as from time to time. Feeling unready is often a sign that you're growing. If you feel uncomfortable, if you feel unsure, if you feel like you're standing, at the edge of something way bigger than you, it's not failure, but it's an awareness that you're having. You know, the people who feel ready, you know, too early usually stop questioning too early. They locked into an identity before they really could understand themselves. But you watching this, you're kind of noticing the gap between who you are and who you can become. And that gap, it probably feels terrifying to you because it means change is required. Growth doesn't feel empowering at first, but it feels disorienting, and that's normal. But your real life is gonna strictly just be built while you're already in it. No one starts real life prepared. We all get brought into the world, against our own will. You build readiness inside of the chaos of just this life that we call life. You learn money by messing it up. You learn confidence by being awkward in situations. You learn direction by choosing, the wrong option sometimes. You know, in waiting to feel ready is how people will stay stuck in their lives. Action will strictly create readiness, and it's not the other way around. And the most dangerous thing that you can do right now is compare your inside to someone else's outside. You don't see their doubts, their late nights, their what am I doing moments. But trust me, they exist. So what actually matters right now in your life? You know, you don't need everything figured out, right? You need direction. You not a destiny that you're trying to reach, but momentum, not the mastery of something. And it's good to reach a mastery, but you got to have that momentum to get to that point. Ask better questions instead of chasing the perfect answers. Am I learning? Am I growing? Am I becoming more capable than I was last year? You know, am I able to see my faults in things? And how do I improve from that? Real life isn't a test that you pass. It's not like school. It's a skill that you build over time and you become better with it. And nobody, not your parents, not your friends, not the people you admire, you know, felt ready when it started for them either, but they just strictly kept going, kept pushing. If you feel lost right now, that doesn't mean that you're failing in your life. It just means that you've outgrown the version of life that was handed to you, which is fine. And that space between who you were and who you're becoming is actually where your real life starts to begin. You're not late, you're not broken, you're not behind, you're just early in the process. I want you to remember that. But thank you for listening. It's TNL. Like, comment, subscribe, and yeah.